There are three forms of authoritarianism. There are three forms of tyranny: social, political, and private. Social authoritarianism refers to the control of cultural and social norms and expectations over the freedom of the individual. Political authoritarianism is the most familiar form of authoritarianism and refers to the power of the government over the freedom of the individual. Private authoritarianism is the control wielded by private businesses over the freedom of the individual. I will now give an example of each form of authoritarianism. An example of social authoritarianism is social norms and expectations that lead to LGBT people being ostracized, isolated, and looked down upon in society. An example of political authoritarianism is the criminalization of LGBT people. An example of private authoritarianism is the refusal of businesses to employ or serve LGBT people. All of these examples are authoritarian enough to deserve the name of tyranny. Social, political, and private tyranny. Authoritarianism is fundamentally built on the ability to harm the individual. It is this threat of harm that coerces the individual into the desired behavior. The different authoritarianisms generally do this in different ways, although overlap does exist. Social authoritarianism ostracizes individuals and subjects them to society's disdain. It also insinuates itself inside of the individual themselves through guilt and self-hatred. Political authoritarianism punishes them with violent measures, which could be anything from fines to the death penalty. Private authoritarianism punishes with its ability to create and destroy the financial well-being of individuals and restrict or remove their access to the goods and services such wealth provides. Obviously, all types of authoritarianism overlap and influence one another to some extent. They are not completely separate and do relate to each other, but I do think there is a utility in grouping authoritarianism into these three categories. Authoritarianism, that is control over the individual by these forces, is not inherently bad. It can discourage immorality, leading to a more moral society, for example. But these things can also become too authoritarian. They can become tyrannical, and it is then that they must be dealt to and put back in their place. Control over individuals exists to help individuals and make society better. Control which doesn't do such things is unjustified. Control which restricts freedom without adequate justification is unjustified. Unjustified control over the individual must be dealt to, so individuals can live their freest, happiest lives. In order to address tyranny, we must first be able to recognize and categorize its very different forms. Many view tyranny simply as a political danger. These people are wrong, and their view will lead to social and private tyranny, remaining unchecked and doing massive harm to society. We must recognize and address all forms of tyranny if we are ever to create the rational and moral society that every rational individual should desire. If you think my three forms of authoritarianism misses something and is too reductive, I would love to hear from you in the comments.